Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. My name's Matthew, and I'm joined today by Connor Jeffers, the founder and CEO of Aptitude 8 and Hapily. How are you today, Connor?
I am well. I'm a little jet lagged. I just got back from the West Coast last night. But other than that, I'm excited to be here. This is better than internal meetings for sure.
Ah, terrific. I'm glad that you're happy about that. Connor, can you tell us a little bit before we get started, give us a brief overview of Aptitude 8 and Hapily?
Yeah, so Aptitude is a technical services company in the HubSpot ecosystem. So we're sort of like implementation, integration, optimization. We work with HubSpot customers and sort of folks that are sort of HubSpot curious on getting the platform deployed and kind of configured for all of their use cases, whether it's sort of, hey, this is my first CRM, I'm migrating off of something like a Salesforce or a Dynamics, or I need to build custom integrations to my ERP or my application or sort of anything else under the sun. That's kind of the core focus of that business. We're HubSpot's highest partner tier and one of the fastest growing companies in their ecosystem. And then Hapily is a software company. They're related. We spun it out of Aptitude 8. They're now a HubSpot Ventures backed software business. And we build apps for the HubSpot marketplace and the HubSpot ecosystem. So we have a couple of tiny applications, basic tools like cloning or VLOOKUP type stuff. And then we also have large applications like Zebra, which are sort of full hyper robust Stripe integrations that sync all of your subscription and your transaction data and kind of everything else over into HubSpot. Honestly, the best way to think about the two is with Aptitude 8, we help one HubSpot customer at a time do really cool stuff with HubSpot. And with Hapily, we kind of take those learnings and we turn them into one-to-many applications that anyone can install and use.
Okay, that's quite interesting. It's a little technical for me, but I'm hoping through the course of this,
Sure.
I'll learn a little bit more about it. So let's go back a little bit. So it's a pretty cool thing. You've got two companies working there together, but it probably didn't start like that. Let's go back a little bit. Let's start maybe with university. Something I always like to ask the people on the show. Were you one of the good kids? Were you a rebel? How was it going through? Did you know where you were going? Tell us a little bit about the start.
I can go all the way back in time. So I went to school in Chicago and I showed up one day and I was super interested in philosophy. And I think my mom at the time was like, you should do an economics degree too, not just be a philosophy student. And so I did both of those. And then I think I added on political science also because I had like a guidance counselor that was like, you can't have three majors. And I've never been very good with authority, which is why I'm an entrepreneur. And so I did that for a bit. And then I actually ended up leaving school. I did loop back and finish a couple years later, but I left school and I joined a technology startup that was in the ed tech space, sort of by accident. I met the CEO at an event, started talking to him. He was like, do you have a job? And at the time it was the summer and I sort of had some summer gig and was like, yeah, but I'm going back to school in a couple of weeks. And he was like, if you work for my company as an SDR, like we'll give you a MacBook Air, which was at 20 years old, the greatest offer I'd ever heard in my entire life. And so
Absolutely.
I said yes, I took it. I ended up scaling up with them from like 25, 30 folks up to a couple hundred over a couple of years and did a stint in sales, did a stint in marketing and kind of grew up with that org. And so that was most of my foundational education as opposed to anything that I really gathered from school.
I like that. So it sounds like a lucky break there, being offered that MacBook. That's a pretty cool way to start. You went through, you did a couple of different things. I see you were also writing articles at one stage, and it looks like you enjoyed the philosophy stuff. Do you still get involved in that, or have you left that behind?
I don't know if I in an armchair kind of a way, right? Like I'm happy to engage anybody in sort of some philosophical conversation, but am far less adept at all of it than I once was for sure. But I think I don't know. I'm this is going to sound ridiculous, but I sort of say like, oh, I'm philosophical and I really enjoy. I think one of the things that I spend the most time on these days is more sort of in the AI universe. And I think that a lot of the background on like sort of chain logic and how does that work and how do you sort of implicate things. And if you evaluate stuff by different criterions, you kind of get very, very different conclusions and outcomes. And I think that's kind of interesting. But no, I spend very, very little time on any of that stuff these days and mostly work.
Let's go on then, building through. You got to Hapily. Aptitude 8 was first. December
Yes.
2019. Was that the birth of Hapily? How did this come about? Where did the idea come from? Um, How did it come
Yeah, for
into
sure.
existence?
So the in between space, I'll skip through quickly, but I think sort of helps create a little bit of context. So the ed tech company that I worked with was called Top Hat. When I left there, I went back to Chicago and I joined a venture studio in Chicago that at the time was called Ronin and is now just Builders VC. And what we were doing at Ronin was essentially, so if you think about like standard venture capital, the biggest challenge is you kind of have to have like a couple of really, really good lucky breaks for a VC investment to work. So one is you have to find a company that is doing something in a space or has an idea, has a model, has something they're doing that's really exciting and scalable and interesting. The second thing is you have to find out and ensure that they have like a founder and a management team that can actually build and scale that idea. And kind of the third one is like they have to pick you. And so the sort of venture studio model says, what if we did the same style, but we didn't have any of those problems? So instead of trying to find companies and invest in them, we would come up with spaces, come up with ideas, build theses around them, create products, build pilots, try to get them into market, get them to have revenue, get them to kind of start to accelerate. And then once we got them up and running to a certain phase, we'd bring in a founder or CEO, give them a significant stake in the business, and then kind of fund it and sort of send them on their way. And I was there for a year and a half, 2 years. It was an absolute blast. And I've basically been chasing that high ever since. But in that whole process, I was leading all of our, we actually called it revenue operations at the time, which is wild. But I was doing sort of all of that work for every portfolio company we had of building their foundational CRM, their marketing infrastructure, all of the things that sort of ran the business. And through that process, we were getting really, really deep into it. And one of our sort of our core compelling points of making those companies successful was building them on really, really solid, scalable, automated internal infrastructure. So they just needed less people. And what also happened is we got amazing data out the other side. And so after doing that for a bit, one of the investors into the studio, because they were sort of on the boards of all of the companies, asked myself and then one of the other operating partners of, hey, how come when we come to the board meetings that we have with your companies, like they have data, they have conversion funnels, they have like theses, they understand what's going on. And every other board meeting I go to, like no one can agree on the numbers and no one knows what's going on. And like everyone's like, oh yeah, we don't track that. We were like, oh, we do like CRM stuff. And he was like, I don't really care what any of those details are, but like, can you come do this for some other companies that we work with? And so myself and a partner spun out of that. We started sort of a little consulting firm doing that type of a work ages ago, which now sort of lots of folks are like, hey, we're RevOps consultancy and kind of that sort of arena. And we were kind of like, he's kind of a fractional VP of sales and I was doing all of the ops work. And we worked with a bunch of startups building that foundational infrastructure. And over the course of that whole process, we got really acquainted with HubSpot. We got really acquainted with Salesforce and the Salesforce for Startups program. He had a baby. He got an offer from one of our clients to come on as sort of their full-time CRO. We decided to kind of go our separate ways. And that was the origination of Aptitude 8, was basically taking kind of this burgeoning business that we kind of started to build and saying, what if we built something that was really focused on systems and ops and really delivering on that type of work, as opposed to let's come to startups and say, we'll do some sales stuff for you and we'll do some ops stuff for you and we'll like help you grow. And instead, the origination of Aptitude 8 was we were a Salesforce partner, we were a HubSpot partner, we were an outreach partner, kind of worked with an amalgamation of marketing automation and CRM technologies and really helped companies get those up and running. And then somewhere later down the line, we became more fully focused on HubSpot as sort of the fastest growing of all of those vendors and of all of those ecosystems.
Wow, it's quite a lot, quite a journey. Between Aptitude 8 and Happily, there was the pandemic. I've got the dates here, 2019 and when was it, 2021, 22? How did that affect you guys?
Yeah. So A, like I think it says like 2019, but we basically like I think I filed the business license in 2019 and then we like hired the first people at the very beginning of 2020. So like quite literally like 2 months into like starting this business, the pandemic happened. And I think one of the things that was wildest at the very beginning of it is because we were doing all of the CRM and systems management, we typically knew before anyone at the company knew. Because like we would get pulled in as saying, hey, here's what's going to happen. This is going to go down on Friday afternoon. Like these are the licenses that we need to deactivate. Here's the people that we need to remove. Can we make sure that when we turn them off, like a bunch of automated stuff doesn't break and like we have to update our lead routing and like all that ops stuff we are really tied into. And so initially it was like, whoa, this is scary. We lost a couple of clients. We gained some clients. Sort of this weird offset happened where there were some folks that we stopped working with, but then you had lots of companies that removed their full-time staff that was managing this, or they were trying to move from we have these really manual, outdated processes and we need to automate them, as well as companies that traditionally worked almost entirely offline. And now they had to figure out how to be online and digital first. And so what ended up happening is I think that COVID really accelerated the growth of the business. We were remote from the outset. It's now like everyone's like, oh, we're remote first. My thesis before that, every business I worked in previously, we like were in WeWorks or shared offices, or we had sort of had small office spaces. And when we were doing the early days of consulting services, like people be like, oh, I'm not coming in today because I have a ton of calls and it's going to be impossible for me to do all those calls like at the office around everybody unless I'm in a WeWork phone booth for 8 hours. And so, or I'm traveling to client sites. And then it basically became like the only time anyone went to the office is when they had nothing better to do. And I was like, this is really dumb. I don't know why we pay for this. And so with A at the outset, we were like, we're going to be fully remote. And then everyone went fully remote. And that really hampered my number one sort of like recruiting trick, which was a little bit of a challenge for a bit there.
Let's hear about this.
Yeah, you can work from home. And everyone's like, that's what we all do. We're forced to. And I was like, oh no. And so that's come back a little bit.
We'll give you a free MacBook Air.
Yeah, exactly. MacBook Air would be so good. You could work from home. And they're like, I already do that. I think the pandemic was super interesting, right? I think because we were in the very early days of our growth and because we already wanted to be remote first, I think it really made us double down on building a business that was designed from the outset to operate that way versus I think as many tried to do and some succeeded and others have failed and others have said, hey, we're all going to go back, is we really built sort of this remote first culture where we don't have an office and there's not some people moved remote and we kept them because they are valuable, but they're now super disconnected and they live 4 states away or sort of whatever starts to happen with types of companies that I think try to do hybrid, which I think is like really, really, really hard. I can't imagine trying to make hybrid work. I think you end up with like a primary and a secondary class of folks and you're trying to kind of like balance those together. So I think that this was about pandemic and A8. It was good for us in that regard. And we sort of hired and grew from people all over the country, though I think that was originally a little bit of our core strategy.
So tell me again about Hapily. Was it born from the pandemic or was it something that was already on its way before then?
Yeah, so sort of the at the outset of Aptitude 8, right? We started to get really well acquainted with the HubSpot and their sort of move to CRM platform. And I always felt like I missed the Salesforce wave. And so the original idea was like, let's go build apps for HubSpot. Like all these people have built successful software companies around the Salesforce ecosystem. Let's go do that with HubSpot. And that was 3 years ago. And like, you couldn't do that. It wasn't a thing. Didn't exist. There was no marketplace for it. And so instead we built the services business. And the idea was always to sort of build the services business, get it to a stage where it was self-sustaining enough that we could start building and launching software products inside of it, both by prototyping it with existing customers, figuring out what to build with existing customers. That was kind of the original thesis. And sort of harkening back, right? We talked about my time at Ronin with the startup studio model, exact same concept, right? Like how can we do that without having to raise a bunch of money, sort of build and launch stuff? We ended up acquiring a company called AppChemist, which was building stuff in the HubSpot space. And we rolled them in, we made them A8 Labs. We built our first product, which is called Associate. We brought in a bunch of products that they already had from Timerman and Clone Attack, and they had a service portal and a real estate product, and they had a couple of different things. So we rolled them in, and the original idea was we are going to sell these products to our existing customers, and we're going to use these products to generate and sort of bring in new leads and new customers. What ended up happening was we sort of accidentally created the software business that was starting to grow really quickly. We were selling to other HubSpot partners. The HubSpot partners had a lot of concern because they were sort of like, hey, I'm trying to take a client. Like they were going to use your app, but are you guys trying to like poach them from us? And despite us being like, no, we don't want to do that. It doesn't really matter. I think that the concern's totally warranted. At the same time, we started talking to HubSpot Ventures, and they had kind of told us that HubSpot's really bullish on ecosystem. They're really bullish on the app universe, and they want to have a lot of these companies building in the space. And in order to do that, they kind of need some lighthouses to point to, is like, here's some companies who built this successfully. You should come in. There's a great way to build a business here. And in conversation with them, we kind of made the decision to spin it out of Aptitude 8, rebrand it as Hapily, and build it up and scale it from there. So Hapily's raised some money, sort of a SaaS startup type business, small team, and kind of building products and building apps. With our next product is all native event management on HubSpot. So everything from I do webinars online to, honestly, I have a podcast as an interesting use case I haven't thought of, all the way up to like, I do big conferences and I have sponsors and I have speakers and I have tickets and I need to kind of manage all of that. We run sort of that whole process.
Okay, so there's a lot going on there. And you spoke a little bit about your team earlier. You've built a nice team around you. How many people are you working with? Who are the main players you've got there?
Yeah, so on the Aptitude 8 side, we've got 40 total folks, all US W-2 full-time for Aptitude 8. Leadership team at A8 is myself. We have a VP of services. She runs all of our service delivery teams, VP of revenue who runs our sales and marketing function, a VP of people ops who does recruiting, HR, compliance, also like retention, people, performance management stuff. As a consulting services business, right? Like people are your product. So we're aggressively invested in a lot of that component, making sure people are happy, successful, and super taken care of. And then a VP of operations who manages sort of all business systems and finance. And so the leadership team is sort of mostly fully built out in that respect. I think sort of as we'll continue to grow and scale, right, you'll get a little bit more, sort of the VP functions become C-level functions. Then you have multiple VP functions underneath that, sort of the normal hierarchical growth of business at large. That's the Aptitude 8 side. For Happily, we're about 9 folks. Myself, I have 2 co-founders, Dax and Tyrone, who came from the original App Chemist business. Dax has had a product and sort of also manages all sort of customer support, success, those sorts of things. And then Tyrone's our CTO. And then we've got some engineers and some product support specialist folks, and no sales headcount, no marketing headcount, though I'm very actively building out that side of the house now that we kind of have a product, people buy it, people like it, people are excited about it. And now we kind of have to go and try to get it into the hands of as many people as we can.
That's terrific. So a good team around you. Let me ask you on a more personal side, what sort of time does this take up for you? Generally, it's one business, but you've got 2 things going on here. You've got 40 people around you. You're busy expanding. There's a lot of things happening. Is it taking up a lot of your time?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? I think one of the big ways to think about it, right? Like I talk a lot about work-life integration and trying to find ways as opposed to saying like, these are my working hours. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to be at a computer. I'm going to do that. And then these are the times I'm going to turn off my laptop. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to look at anything. I'm not going to Slack on my phone. I think that's fine for some people. I think that it just sort of depends on how you want your work to go. I think for me, it's pretty interlaced. And so I don't really ever, this is going to sound ridiculous, I don't really ever like stop working, but I'm also like not hands on keyboard at a computer doing stuff all of the time. And I think that phones and also scale, right? Like I can contribute to stuff on Slack. I can consume things. I can have like, I call it like work gaming, which I'll often do sort of on the weekends. Like I'll play something, I'll tab out, I'll work a bit, I'll come back. And so being able to do a lot of that helps. But I think the other thing is it helps that I can't imagine running 2 businesses that have no relationship, but like not a combined core focus, right? I think that the thing that makes this possible, I wouldn't say easier, but possible, is that my core job really, right, is I think about what do HubSpot customers want? I think about what does HubSpot, the product, allow for and is capable of, and what can it do? And then I sort of maintain relationships with HubSpot, the company. And that job scales across both businesses in pretty impactful way, as opposed to like, I'm doing this one thing in the services space, and then like I started a coffee shop, and like those are 2 radically different things that have nothing to do with one another. So there's a lot of complementary things that happen despite them being sort of different business entities and different teams.
So that makes it a bit easier then for you as far as maintaining a work-life balance goes. I find that quite a lot. When people enjoy their work, you're not sacrificing any of your life to go to work.
Yeah.
So to
I
speak.
don't think I have like a line, which is probably bad. I don't know if I'd recommend this, but I think the difference is like, I think some people are like, oh, there's work over here and then there's my life over here. And for me, I think it's just super interlaced. Like, I don't know that it's ever, I don't have like working. I have hours that people are online and I have meetings with them. And that's about the closest that I can mentally get to like work life versus non-work life. Is like, oh, yeah. I shouldn't bother them right now. It's like as good as I get. But I also don't think like, I don't feel like I'm like, oh God, I'm just like chained to my desk and typing away code at 2 a.m. Like that's not really how I spend my time. And so I don't know if maybe that means I'm not hardcore enough. Maybe it means I'm too hardcore. I have no idea.
Is there somebody you look up to and say, that's how I want to do these things?
I don't have one person that would be like, oh, this is the person I aspire to. I think I have lots of mentors through my life, which have all been super impactful on like a one-to-one basis. Too many for me to list and thank, but I think I had great bosses. I had sort of like family friends that I got to spend a lot of time with and get exposed to. And I think all of that's pretty impactful. And then I think the other thing that's really good is like, I think one of the amazing things about the modern world is like, you can go and you can read books by and about a lot of people, right? Like you can read about like a Jobs or a Bezos or like any of these things. But I think the other thing that's amazing is like, most people now will go and do a podcast and talk about their experience and their life kind of thing. Like one of the things I listened to recently, and I wasn't expecting to listen to all of them, but Lex Friedman interviewed both Mark Zuckerberg, which was amazing. And I'm not like a huge Zuckerberg fan, but I like listened to this and I was like, this is incredible. Like being able to just like listen to this is amazing. And then Mark Andreessen, which I was like, listened to all of and was really excited about. But I think the thing that's amazing, and I think I'd encourage anybody, is it is so easy to access the ideas and insights of people. And if you find people who do cool stuff, and it doesn't even have to be in your space, lots of them will go and do podcasts or do interviews or talk about stuff, and you can access all of that, and it's usually free. And I think that that's like one of the most impactful things that you can do. And so I spend a lot of time, I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Nice. I like that. And you're right. I mean, that information is everywhere these days. And it's up to us whether we choose to access it or not. Talking about accessing information, learning new things, is there anything significant that you learned about yourself through this journey, through your experiences, studying, working, trying things out, opening companies? What are some of the things you learned about who you are and your abilities?
I'm really bad at, and I think in some ways this maybe is a superpower, but I think in a lot of ways it's also a detractor. I am very bad at authority and following rules and checklists and other things. And it just like, it irks me to my core. And I'm like super allergic to inefficiency and poorly optimized things. And in some ways that's something that like, that really drives a lot of building and creating of like, oh, there should be a better way to do this. Like, I'm going to figure it out. But at the same time, without going too deep into any specific examples, right? Like for a while, we used to do these programs with partners, HubSpot and not HubSpot. For those that are listening, you be more acquainted with HubSpot does things. There are other people we did this for, which were software companies that sort of they paid partners to do onboarding or do implementation or do setup. And when they build those programs, sometimes they tend to build them, which I think makes sense, right? In like hyper rigorous ways. Like these are the steps, these are the checklists, this is the process, this is what you have to follow. And I'm really bad at doing those when I'm like, I think that this conflicts with what the customer wants, and I think it conflicts with what we want, and I don't think it's good for you. And I'm like, here's maybe what we could do differently to make this better. And they're like, you should really follow the rules of the program that we've created. And that ends up putting me into like a lot of conflict with the people that are supposed to manage these programs. And so I try to hire people who are very good at figuring out and sort of seeing where the lines are and coloring them in the way that they're supposed to be colored in. Because I usually end up throwing a piece of paper away and just like sketching something myself, which gets you into trouble when what you should be doing is coloring in the lines. That's sort of what comes to mind with something that like I've learned I'm not good at that. And when I start to encounter those things, I have to say, this is a game I'm not going to win, or I need to bring in somebody who excels at this sort of a thing because it's something I'm particularly weak at.
Okay, nice. Well, good. And then if I came to you and I said, look, here's my idea. I want to start one of these companies. I'm fresh out the gate. Your first words before I get going, before I take step number one, what's your first words of advice?
Do you know where you're going, and do you have a plan to get there? I think one of the things that I see a lot, I talk about this with Dax, who's one of the Hapily co-founders, and I see this a lot, like in whether it's startup subreddits or people who want to be entrepreneurs or like talk about this, like, oh, I'm trying to find like the killer idea, or I'm trying to like really validate this thing, or like I have this product and I'm trying to like show it to users and like figure out if it's something that would add any value to them. Like that whole process is really not a good use of time. I think if you're going to start anything, you have to really first be like, okay, what is the thing that I'm trying to, people frame it as the problem you're trying to solve, which I think is right. Or like, what is the product that you want to build? Like you have to have a really deep conviction about something in the universe that could be better. And you have to have a really good idea, which could be totally wrong. And you'll find out later, like the way you did it was totally wrong. That's okay. But you have to have like a really, well, like, I think this thing is broken and I think it could be better. And here's how I think it could be better. And this is my theory of like what better looks like. And then you should try to go and see if people will pay for that better thing. But I think if you don't have those first two parts, go work somewhere, go learn something, get experience in a space, like, and say, oh, this area is really interesting to me. That isn't, oh, I want to start a business. It's like, this area is really interesting to me. Go work in it until you're like, you have a handful of problems you've uncovered. And you have to be really obsessed with, I think that there's a better way to do this. And the way it's being done today drives me crazy. And if there's somebody else who's solving that problem, go help them solve it. Like, you'll learn a lot by doing things with other people. What I see, especially with folks younger and I was that person, right? Like, I was 22 and I was like, I'm going to start a company, and I didn't. And like, I didn't because I was like, I like can't wait to get out the gates. And I think that I would have failed. I think if I had waited even longer, I think I would have done it better. I think the more experience and knowledge you have, the better. But I think you really have to start with, here's a problem. I know it's a problem. I'm obsessed with it. And I have a really good idea what the future could look like if we could only do it better. And if you're like, I don't really know what either of those things are, like, you really should just stop and not do anything else.
Good advice. Good advice. I like that. I've got 2 more for you. Famous quote, words to live by. We're going to stick it up above your bed. You have to look at it every day. What does it say?
I have a phrase, not from anybody famous, but from a mentor of my youth, which is like, to do good work and the rest will follow. And I think that the more you focus on, how do I make sure that the thing that I'm building, the work that I'm delivering, the service I'm providing, whatever it is really, really good. And the more that you obsess about that, everything else will kind of work out along the way. And whether that's like a product or whether it's anything else, I think if you do good work, the rest will follow.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And the last one then for you, are you a big fan of Star Wars?
Yes. Big fan of Star Wars, big fan of Legos. I'm not a terribly, for those in the audio version, I have a giant Lego AT-AT behind me, and I have lots of other Lego Star Wars stuff that is not in view. I'm not really a collector, but I don't think I've ever bought anything. I'm like I'll see an ad, I'll think something's interesting, I'm going to go research the thing, I'm going to find out all the different versions of it, read all the Reddits to make sure I like do the best one, and I'm very not impulsive with purchasing, with the very hard exception of the Lego AT-AT, which got served to me in an Instagram ad, and I like blacked out and then purchased it. And I've never, the time between I saw it and I was like, I have to have this. Like, there's no world I can live in that doesn't have this in it. I guess the fastest I've ever purchased anything.
Oh, it's fantastic. I love it. I've been having a good look at it, and it looks beautiful. And I'm really jealous actually of the people that have grown up recently with Lego. I grew up with Lego in the late 80s and the early 90s, and back then it was, it was square blocks. That was it. They brought out 1 or 2 wheels, and you had to build everything out of different size rectangles.
Wheels, man, change the game.
Yeah, absolutely. My daughter's gotten into it. She collects the Harry Potter stuff, and now it moves and it like reacts to sunlight. I'm waiting for it to start making me coffee, and then that'll be the pinnacle.
They have a lot of amazing 18-up Legos now that are incredible. That they use a typewriter that's incredible. They have a piano. The piano's super cool. They have amazing. I check it out. It's really good. Especially if you have kids. You can do it with the kids, and it's fun, even if they don't really like. It might be complex, and you're like, oh, let's find these parts, and we'll put it together.
I'll be just like the dad in the movie, and I'll be like, don't touch my Lego, child. We're sending her to boarding school so she doesn't play with my Lego. Anyways, Connor, listen, I want to say thanks for taking time out of your schedule to see us today. It's been a great pleasure meeting you and having a conversation. Is there anything you'd like to add before we go?
Nothing to add. I think if you're HubSpot curious, if you're a HubSpot customer and you want to do cool stuff with it, give me a shout. Connect on LinkedIn. I'm super accessible, and whether I can help or I can point you in the right direction, I'd be more than happy to.
Fantastic. Connor, thanks so much, my friend. You keep well, and I hope you feel better as the week goes on.